The Secret, first published in This Week, 11 August 1963, as The Secret of the Men in the Moon, collected in The Wind from the Sun.
Henry Cooper had been on the moon for almost 2 weeks before he discovered that something was wrong. At first, it was only an ill-defined suspicion, the sort of hunch that a hard-headed science reporter would not take too seriously. He had come here, after all, at the United Nations Space Administration's own request. U.N.S.A. had always been hot on public relations, especially just before budget time, when an overcrowded world was screaming for more roads and schools and sea farms, and complaining about the billions being poured into space. So, here he was, doing the lunar circuit for the second time, and beaming back 2,000 words of copy a day. Although the novelty had worn off, there still remained the wonder and mystery of a world as big as Africa, thoroughly mapped, yet almost completely unexplored. A stone's throw away from the pressure domes, the labs, the spaceports, was a yawning emptiness that would challenge men for centuries to come. Some parts of the moon were almost too familiar, of course. Who had not seen that dusty scar in the Mare Imbrium, with its gleaming metal pylon and the plaque that announced in the 3 official languages of Earth, on this spot at 2001 UT, 13 September 1959, the first man-made object reached another world. Cooper had visited the grave of Lunik II, and the more famous tomb of the men who had come after it. But these things belonged to the past. Already, like Columbus and the Wright brothers, they were receding into history. What concerned him now was the future. When he had landed at Archimedes Spaceport, the chief administrator had been obviously glad to see him, and had shown a personal interest in his tour. Transportation, accommodation, and official guide were all arranged. He could go anywhere he liked, ask any questions he pleased. U.N.S.A. trusted him, for his stories had always been accurate, his attitude friendly. Yet the tour had gone sour. He did not know why, but he was going to find out. He reached for the phone and said, "Operator, please get me the police department. I want to speak to the Inspector General." Presumably, Chandra Kumaraswamy possessed a uniform, but Cooper had never seen him wearing it. They met, as arranged, at the entrance to the little park that was Plato's city's chief pride and joy. At this time in the morning of the artificial 24-hour day, it was almost deserted, and they could talk without interruption. As they walked along the narrow gravel paths, they chatted about old times, the friends they had known at college together, the latest developments in interplanetary politics. They had reached the middle of the park, under the exact center of the great blue-painted dome, when Cooper came to the point. "You know everything that's happening on the moon, Chandra," he said. "And you know that I'm here to do a series for U.N.S.A., hoping to make a book out of it when I get back to Earth. So why should people be trying to hide things from me?" It was impossible to hurry Chandra. He always took his time to answer questions, and his few words escaped with difficulty around the stem of his hand-carved Bavarian pipe. "What people?" he asked at length. "You've really no idea?" The Inspector General shook his head. "Not the faintest," he answered, and Cooper knew that he was telling the truth. Chandra might be silent, but he would not lie. "I was afraid you'd say that. Well, if you don't know any more than I do, here's the only clue I have, and it frightens me. Medical research is trying to keep me at arm's length." Replied Chandra, taking his pipe from his mouth and looking at it thoughtfully. "Is that all you have to say?" "You haven't given me much to work on. Remember, I'm only a cop. I lack your vivid journalistic imagination. All I can tell you is that the higher I get in medical research, the colder the atmosphere becomes. Last time I was here, everyone was very friendly, and gave me some fine stories, but now I can't even meet the director. He's always too busy or on the other side of the moon. Anyway, what sort of man is he? Dr. Hastings? Prickly little character, very competent, but not very easy to work with. What could he be trying to hide? Knowing you, I'm sure you have some interesting theories. Oh, I thought of narcotics and fraud and political conspiracies, but they don't make sense in these days. So what's left scares the hell out of me. Chandra's eyebrows signaled a silent question mark. Interplanetary plague, said Cooper bluntly. I thought it was impossible. Yes, I've written articles myself proving that the life forms on other planets have such alien chemistries that they can't react with us, and that all our microbes and bugs took millions of years to adapt to our bodies. But I've always wondered if it was true. Suppose a ship has come back from Mars, say, with something really vicious, and the doctors can't cope with it. There was a long silence. Then Chandra said, I'll start investigating. I don't like it either, for here's an item you probably don't know. There were 3 nervous breakdowns in the medical division last month, and that's very, very unusual. He glanced at his watch, then at the false sky, which seemed so distant, yet which was only 200 feet above their heads. We'd better get moving, he said. The morning shower's due in 5 minutes. The call came 2 weeks later, in the middle of the night, the real lunar night. By Plato City time, it was Sunday morning. Henry? Chandra here. Can you meet me in half an hour at Airlock 5? Good. I'll see you. This was it, Cooper knew. Airlock 5 meant that they were going outside the dome. Chandra had found something. The presence of the police driver restricted conversation as the tractor moved away from the city, along the road roughly bulldozed across the ash and pumice. Low in the south, Earth was almost full, casting a brilliant blue-green light over the infernal landscape. However hard one tried, Cooper told himself, it was difficult to make the moon appear glamorous. But nature guards her greatest secrets well. To such places men must come to find them. The multiple domes of the city dropped below the sharply curved horizon. Presently, the tractor turned aside from the main road to follow a scarcely visible trail. 10 minutes later, Cooper saw a single glittering hemisphere ahead of them, standing on an isolated ridge of rock. Another vehicle bearing a red cross was parked beside the entrance. It seemed that they were not the only visitors. Nor were they unexpected. As they drew up to the dome, the flexible tube of the airlock coupling groped out toward them and snapped into place against their tractor's outer hull. There was a brief hissing as pressure equalized. Then Cooper followed Chandra into the building. The airlock operator led them along curving corridors and radial passageways toward the center of the dome. Sometimes they caught glimpses of laboratories, scientific instruments, computers, all perfectly ordinary and all deserted on this Sunday morning. They must have reached the heart of the building, Cooper told himself, when their guide ushered them into a large circular chamber and shut the door softly behind them. It was a small zoo. All around them were cages, tanks, jars containing a wide selection of the fauna and flora of Earth. Waiting at its center was a short, gray-haired man, looking very worried and very unhappy. Dr. Hastings, said Kumaraswamy. Meet Mr. Cooper. The Inspector General turned to his companion and added, I've convinced the doctor that there's only one way to keep you quiet, and that's to tell you everything. Frankly, said Hastings, I'm not sure if I give a damn anymore. His voice was unsteady, barely under control, and Cooper thought, hello, there's another breakdown on the way. The scientist wasted no time on such formalities as shaking hands. He walked to one of the cages, took out a small bundle of fur, and held it toward Cooper. "Do you know what this is?" he asked abruptly. "Of course, a hamster, the commonest lab animal." "Yes," said Hastings. "A perfectly ordinary golden hamster, except that this one is 5 years old, like all the others in this cage." "Well, what's odd about that?" "Oh, nothing. Nothing at all. Except for the trifling fact that hamsters live for only 2 years, and we have some here that are getting on for 10. For a moment no one spoke, but the room was not silent. It was full of rustlings and slitherings and scratchings, of faint whimpers and tiny animal cries. Then Cooper whispered, "My God, you've found a way of prolonging life." "No," retorted Hastings. "We've not found it. The moon has given it to us, as we might have expected if we'd looked in front of our noses." He seemed to have gained control over his emotions, as if he was once more the pure scientist, fascinated by a discovery for its own sake, and heedless of its implications. "On Earth," he said, "we spend our whole lives fighting gravity. It wears down our muscles, pulls our stomachs out of shape. In 70 years, how many tons of blood does the heart lift through how many miles? And all that work, all that strain is reduced to a sixth here on the moon, where a 180-pound human weighs only 30 pounds. "I see," said Cooper slowly. 10 years for a hamster, and how long for a man? "It's not a simple law," answered Hastings. "It varies with the size and the species. Even a month ago we weren't certain, but now we're quite sure of this. On the moon, the span of human life will be at least 200 years. And you've been trying to keep it a secret? You fool! Don't you understand?" "Take it easy, Doctor, take it easy," said Chandra softly. With an obvious effort of will, Hastings got control of himself again. He began to speak with such icy calm that his words sank like freezing raindrops into Cooper's mind. "Think of them up there," he said, pointing to the roof, to the invisible Earth, whose looming presence no one on the moon could ever forget. 6 billion of them, packing all the continents to the edges, and now crowding over into the seabeds. And here," he pointed to the ground, "only 100,000 of us, on an almost empty world, but a world where we need miracles of technology and engineering merely to exist, where a man with an IQ of only 150 can't even get a job. And now we find that we can live for 200 years. Imagine how they're going to react to that news. This is your problem now, Mr. Journalist. You've asked for it, and you've got it. Now tell me this, please. I'd really be interested to know. Just how are you going to break it to them?" He waited, and waited. Cooper opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to think of anything to say. In the far corner of the room, a baby monkey started to cry.